Good morning. Congratulations, Madam President. Once again, I'm very happy to see you in front of us. It's a privilege and honor to be the first speaker in the first debate in the new term. It's an honor. Thank you very much. I would like to say several sentences on initiative we are facing to vote. This about Ukraine, that it was said, but generally speaking, it's about our security, our common European security. This is the most important challenge we are facing. So, because in Poland, we have a common understanding of this issue, and I can emphasize that we have a strong opinion on that. Over the political split, I would like to use my mother tongue and to have an honor to say something in Polish. So please use your headphones. Szanowni Państwo,
ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the European People's Party, I would like to express our thanks to all of the coordinators of the 5 political groups, because we have a motion for resolution with very broad backing. The European People's Party is behind this resolution. I want to also thank the Socialists and Democrats, the Conservatives and Reformists, the Renew Europe group and the Green group. We were very close to having the left on board, and this is very important. It is very important because we're talking about our future, our security. This is the House expressing a view on behalf of the European community. As Prime Minister Donald Tusk said, anyone who helps Ukraine helps themselves. Increasing Ukraine's security increases our security and the security of the people we represent. And nobody has a right to call themselves a patriot if they undermine this joint effort on our part and limits the help that we seek to give. This is a difficult time. We have a new parliament, but this new parliament has not yet started legislating. On the other hand, this parliament must express a view on what is happening in Ukraine. And this is why we have a motion for resolution on the EU's continuous support for Ukraine. Until Russia is defeated, Russia attacked Ukraine, Putin gives the orders to kill children. Putin should be in The Hague. Putin is answerable to the International Criminal Court alone. Nobody should be negotiating with Putin. And this is our task as Europeans. Ukraine wants to stand on its 2 feet and have a European future. And we want to help Ukraine also in our own interest. There will be economic, political and military support for Ukraine.
Sorry, the time is over. Apeluję o to, by...
I therefore call upon you to vote in favor of this motion. Ukraine needs our support. Together we are stronger. Thank you.
Now on behalf of the S&D Group, Irache Garcia Perez.
Gracias.
Thank you, President. Since the beginning of Putin's war against Ukraine, we've witnessed the strength, courage and resilience of the Ukrainian people. We are also witnessing regrettably, the violation of the most basic norms and principles of international law and the United Nations Charter. And for a long time now, we've also been witnessing the collusion of the far right in this House with Putin. A few days ago, the most visible head of the new group of false patriots, Orban, met with Putin to denigrate the European Union, to proclaim that he has a peace plan that nobody knows about, and to promote Russian expansionism. What peace does Orban want to talk about with a tyrant like Putin, who has a warrant for his arrest by the International Court in The Hague? The false patriots upholding values such as Russian bombing of innocent human beings in homes, hospitals and schools. Ladies and gentlemen, the EU's support for Ukraine must be based on an inalienable principle, the rejection of the use of force in international relations, and also on a clear objective, a just peace with the unconditional withdrawal of all Russian forces from Ukrainian soil. It will take weeks, months, or years, but the Ukrainian people will win the war, because history has taught us that in every war there are always two battles. One is the battle of ideas, and Ukraine has already won it, because the Ukrainian people have chosen democracy over those who despise it. The Ukrainian people have chosen freedom and openness over those who fear it. The Ukrainian people have chosen independence over those who still dream of the old empires. And the Ukrainian people have decided that their future is in the EU. The other battle takes place on the battlefield. And if we, in the European Union, have always said that the Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom and for ours, we have the obligation to give Ukraine every material assistance until its final victory. This is why we will support Ukraine until Putin puts an end to his crimes. We will support Ukraine with the confiscation of the €200 billion of Russian public assets frozen for armament and reconstruction. And we will support Ukraine until its aspirations to decide its own destiny as a member of the European Union are realised. Ladies and gentlemen, we represent a generation of Europeans who've always seen the European project as a beacon of freedom and social justice. Faced with the group of false patriots, let us, the democratic and pro-European forces, unite and work tirelessly to ensure that the Ukrainian people live without fear or threat, to ensure that they live in security and in peace. The future of shared progress with Ukraine is our aspiration and our conviction. Slava Ukraini. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for the Patriots group, Jordan Bardella.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on the 24th of February 2022, we saw a tragedy of history, an unjustified, illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. And this showed us that peace was very precarious. And I said very clearly, we cannot let Russian imperialism absorb Ukraine. We cannot allow Russia to violate the sovereignty of Ukraine or threaten international order and peace. However, the resolution that you're proposing today is problematic on several levels. Each member state would have to contribute 0.5% of the GDP per year. That would be €7 billion in France per year. That's mentioned in the resolution. The proposals, for example, for Ukraine to enter NATO is very problematic for us. This could lead to an escalation of the war. And the resolution would also threaten the survival of our economy and farming, because it would severely impact the common agricultural policy. This resolution condemns the visits by Viktor Orban to Russia. We can't accuse Hungary, a key partner in the transatlantic alliance, of impacting things negatively when they are trying to open discussions. Will you condemn this at the Peace Summit in November? And it's also an issue of war material, ammunition, and military production in Europe. For too long, this has been hindered by green objectives, which have hindered our technological and defence industry. The overall long-term response in Europe is to focus on strategic autonomy, focusing on its agricultural and industrial independence. And in this strategic agenda, France needs to play a key role in focusing on strategic defence infrastructure in the east of Europe, based on all of the material in the world. France will also focus on key alliances, and our country should never sway from that. Thank you very much.
I give the floor next for the ECR group to Joachim Brusinski.
Dziękuję, Pani Przewodnicząca.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, more than 2 years have gone by since Russia started a barbaric war against Ukraine. For 2 years, Poland, my country, has opened up its borders to genuine refugees. Thanks to the determination of the government, non-government organizations, the Catholic Church, thanks to the open hearts and homes of millions of Poles, Ukrainians have found safety in the flats and houses of ordinary Polish people, not in camps. We have to decide now what we want. Only a Ukrainian victory can lead to Putin's defeat. Ukraine's defeat would bring Russian forces to our borders. Russia would then deploy nuclear weapons on our borders, increase its forces, and get ready for another invasion. This could take months, it could take years. It could begin with a hybrid attack or a full-scale invasion. But it doesn't matter whether the Russian army heads west or east. It is a threat. It is an unacceptable threat, especially as we have the tools available to stop the aggressor. Russia must also be held to account for its crimes. There is no peace without justice. We have to make sure that Putin and the other war criminals are brought to justice. We have to use all the tools available to seize Russian assets in order to rebuild Ukraine's economy at Russia's expense. We shouldn't be importing Russian fertilizer because now we're buying fertilizer instead of gas. We should not be naive in terms of Russia's ambitions. They have been clearly stated and they're firmly embedded in Russia's strategic doctrine. Russia is starting wars in former Soviet republics, and it's using its military and intelligence agencies to weaken democracies across the world. Thank you.
Now for the Renew Europe group, Valérie Ayet.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, Ukraine needs to become a free land again for territorial integrity and for our geopolitical balance, for peace. It's a moral obligation for the people of Ukraine and the neighbouring countries. We need to be clear. There's been so much fake news from Moscow and its allies, but there's only one aggressor and only one party aggressed in this war. Ukraine's security is our security. Vladimir Putin is trying to destabilize our continent by bombing Kyiv. There are border provocations in Finland, and we are seeing the consequences in France, in Germany, the main armaments producer was subject to an assassination plot. We're seeing hybrid threats and interference in European politics. The only possible response is a firm response to Putin's propaganda, including in this House. We must step up our support for Zelensky and the brave people of Ukraine. Let us not give way to Putin's acolytes, to Orban, to those who have no mandate to speak on behalf of the EU, such as Orban, actually endangering our union and going to the Kremlin when within days of more bombing attacks on Ukrainian soil. There's difficult, brave reform necessary as Ukraine moves towards accession. The people can count on us. We need to meet the call. We have stood with Ukraine from the first day. We have welcomed Ukrainian refugees. We are providing materials. We have the Ukraine facility to the tune of approximately 50 billion euro. We say to the people of Ukraine once again, from this inaugural session of the new European Parliament, we will continue to support you until victory. And, dear colleagues, our group, Renew Europe, will always stand up for the freedom of Ukraine. We will be the most ardent supporters of European defence policy, for investment in our joint security with common procurement for defence materials. We need to support Ukraine alongside our transatlantic alliance, and words alone won't make a change, but our votes can do so as we enter this new mandate. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, on behalf of the Greens Group, Sergei Lagodinsky.
Dear colleagues, dear citizens, but in the first place, dear Ukrainians, шановні українські друзі, цей стейтмент – це знак нашої солідарності, нашої єдиності, це знак нашої непорушної солідарності з вами.
It is a signal of our solidarity that we speak out for you today. Our deepest sympathy and admiration for your heroism, for your will to fight, to become part of a united Europe, to be together with all of us.
Statement on the second day of this legislative term is about our support for Ukraine. I remember negotiating our first resolution immediately after the full-fledged assault of Russia against Ukraine in 2022 with many of you. This was a moment of unity, of our unity, European understanding of what it is all about now, a moment when the main pro-European parties all sat down together in this House and realized Europe also means responsibility for our common future and solidarity with our neighbors, especially with Ukrainians. Ever since, we have been standing firmly on the side of Ukraine, firmly on the side of international law and peaceful European order. The past elections changed nothing on this position. Anyone who states otherwise has to explain to us how else we could secure peace, international rules, humanity on our continent, if not by supporting Ukraine. Our support must be effective, though. The time for speeches is over. If we don't want Russia to destroy the last pieces of Ukrainian infrastructure, we have to invest more in effective ammunition, defense systems, jets that would enable Ukraine to defend its space. False patriots are talking about escalations. We just saw a children's hospital destroyed. And this was not the first time children's hospitals, maternity clinics, theaters full of civilians who were destroyed. We are not escalating here. It's Putin who is escalated. And we have to enable Ukrainians to defend themselves. And one more thing we have to enable them is to become part of our European family. And this is the role for this Parliament. We already started our bilateral meetings with Rada on how to make an accession for Ukraine possible.
you.
We will continue. This upcoming 5 years will be instrumental on our joint path to the freedom for Ukraine and to Europe for Ukraine.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lagodinsky. Next for the Left Group, Martin Schirdewan.
Thank you, Madam President. Of course, the European Union should continue to support stop this Russian war. Ukraine is under attack from Russian drones and missiles. We've seen the brutality of Russia's war in the attack on the Children's Hospital. We owe our sympathy to the victims and their loved ones. There are very often Western electronic components in these Russian weapons with either German quality marks or made in the USA written on them. German car parts exports to Kyrgyzstan have increased by 5,100% in 4 years. These exports are obviously ultimately going to Russia, circumventing sanctions, and the EU is saying nothing. Why are there no effective sanctions on the corrupt Russian oligarchs and the military-industrial complex? I can tell you why. The corporations are dictating the terms, and they don't want to lose business just because Russia is waging war on Ukraine. Our citizens for 2 years are suffering as a result. We should not be protecting the assets of oligarchs. This is not going to bring Putin to the negotiating table. The EU is failing in its diplomatic initiatives, and I won't even mention Orban's trip to Moscow. More weapons is not the answer. The future of a peaceful Europe lies in the strengthening of international organizations, lies in disarmament, not a new arms race.
The Europe of Sovereign Nations Group, René Aust.
Thank you very much, Madam President. All of Europe is yearning for peace, but there are various views. On one hand, more and more weapons deliveries and more sanctions. For now, for more than 800 days, this hasn't led to peace. But then there are, and this, what it's actually done is brought member states of the European Union closer to war. Apparently, tanks were going to make a change. And the French president has even asked for soldiers to be posted in the west of Ukraine. Since 2022, this strategy has changed nothing. The situation has got even worse in Ukraine, and more people continue to die. Hundreds of thousands of fathers, sons, mothers and daughters have died. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if we want a different result, we need to take a different approach. If we want to make a change, we need to modify our strategy. Time is right for a change. Therefore, I'm grateful that Mr. Orban is taking responsibility. Political leadership in a democratic society means standing up for what's right, even if there is opposition. It's not just about taking the comfortable, popular route. No, it's about doing what's right and making that popular. What's right is to change strategy and exert pressure to ensure that we start peace talks. even if this is very difficult and time-consuming, because Helmut Schmidt said it's better to have hours and hours of negotiations rather than just 1 minute of shooting.
Thank you. Now we will go to the Catch the Eye. We have quite a few requests. We will go through them group by group, also in the order in which we received them, starting with the EPP group. Mr. Michael Gahler. It's coming, wait. Okay.
Now it's coming, yeah. Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin, liebe...
Thank you, Madam President, colleagues, esteemed Ukrainian friends. As rapporteur in the last term for the 50 billion Ukraine facility, I want to say that we need to maintain this political consensus, this broad consensus across parties in favor of support for Ukraine in the 10th term. It's important for Ukraine to win. It's important for the aggressor to be expelled from the country. We've had the 50 billion, we've had political resolutions, we've had 90% support for this. We can do all of these things, but we must not maintain the possibility for Ukraine physically to drive the Russians out of their territory. That means military help. This is aggression not just against Ukraine, but against us too.
Now it's Thijs Reuten.
Thank you, President, and thanks to all colleagues from the political groups who tabled this text. We ended this term with a clear call on Member States' governments for more air defence systems. And we see almost every day why these are necessary. But still, many Member States have systems in storage that can be delivered, should be delivered, to protect Ukrainians, to protect also our collective European security. And I'm glad this legislature starts off with reaffirming our strong support for Ukraine. We will continue to push Member States to take their responsibility, finally and swiftly delivering Ukraine everything it needs to win. Ukraine is Europe, and the free people of Ukraine will make our union of values stronger. Thank you. Slava Ukraina.
Thank you. Mr. Reuten, next is Herman Tertsch.
Thank you, President. It's a bit odd, isn't it, after 2 years of these events, hearing people talking about defending sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity of Ukraine as attacked by Russia, that we should all bear this in mind, including those who stand for sovereignty, those who say that nations should be dissolved and abandoned. We've got the Spanish socialists in power thanks to those who live alongside Putin and Puigdemont, who believe in doing things by coup, like Puigdemont in Catalonia. Spain has turned into the main purchaser of Russian gas after China, thanks to Mr. Sanchez. So let's stop this con. The Germans are responsible too. They didn't give weapons to the Ukrainians. They sabotaged Ukrainian self-defense, as the French did for 2 years, and they're now coming to us with a sob story because the Ukrainians are in the position that they are. Where are those German weapons? They should have been there from the beginning.
Cascos mandaban a Ucrania.
They were just sending helmets.
Give the floor now to Mr. Kos.
Die SPD hat Moskau gelebt.
All right, we give the floor next to Rihat Kols. Mr. Kols.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, there are more than half of us that are newly elected to this Parliament, and it is very important today to vote for this statement, and I thank the authors of this statement, and I will say why. Because Kremlin is closely watching. how each and every one of us is going to vote today. Because, first of all, we cannot hesitate, because hesitation is something that provokes autocrats, particularly Putin. And hesitation in Kremlin is seen as a weakness. And nothing provokes autocrats more than those show of free people of the weakness. So therefore, we have to step up with all the support that we can provide to Ukraine. It should be not put under question. The statement titled, "The Need for the EU's Continuous Support for Ukraine," it's not with a question mark. It's with the explanation. There is a need, immediate need to support Ukraine in this House, in this Parliament. And once again, everyone, be cautious. Kremlin is closely watching who is voting how for this statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Nathalie Loiseau.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We have already mentioned this. The Malaysia Airlines plane was shot down 10 years ago, and Russia is waging a war against Ukraine. And here in the European institutions, we are mentioning lots of words, but we don't have enough ammunition, enough weapons to be able to allow Ukraine to win. And there isn't enough political will. There's not enough financial resources to allow Ukraine to win. But for 10 years now, we've known that Russia's attitude towards Ukraine has been a security risk for the European Union and for our citizens. And now we know that Donald Trump could once again be the President of the United States, and he has chosen as candidate for Vice President somebody who wants to abandon Ukraine and who wants to abandon Europe. It's never been as urgent as now to build a European Union of defence.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Katarina Roth-Nevedalova.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne, pani predsednička.
Thank you very much, Madam President. This first sitting is about symbols, and it's a shame that this first sitting isn't about our citizens, isn't about poverty, it's about a third country, Ukraine. But I understand. I do wonder why we're not talking about Gaza. Are the people there not as important as the ones in Ukraine? Political leaders across the world who have dissenting views are attacked, be they Donald Trump or Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico. What we should be talking about here, even when we're talking about Ukraine, is peace in the European Union. The European Union is a peace project. We should insist on peace negotiations, a peaceful solution. We should have both sides round the negotiating table so as to install peace in Ukraine. We shouldn't talk about sending more weapons.
Davor Stier.
Hvala predsjednice i čestitam još jednom na izboru. Trebamo našu potporu Ukrajini da bude stalna. Naravno, to je potpora našim europskim...
Thank you very much. Obviously,
the support for our European values, democracy and freedom. There is no peace without justice. That is why we should say here that we need peace. But the price of peace cannot be territory, because that would be the reward for the Russian aggressor. So I, who come from a country that was victim of aggression in the 1990s, I think that it is very important not to put on the same footing the aggressor and the victim. It is very important never to reward the aggressor. That is why I think that from this European Parliament we should send a message that we do support the creation of a special tribunal for the crime of aggression. It is very important to send a message that the aggressor is not going to be rewarded but punished. That should be our message from today from Strasbourg.
Next is Sven Mikser.
President, dear colleagues, I think it's very symbolic and very important that we kick off this new mandate by renewing our pledge of support to Ukraine against the barbaric aggression launched by Putin over 2 years ago. But obviously, making symbolic statements alone is not sufficient. We have to back it up by real deeds. That means we have to give more weapons and ammunition, we have to do it more quickly, and we have to lift all the restrictions that today hinder Ukraine's ability to effectively hit back against the aggressor. Let's be honest, we can only say that Europe has done enough when the liberation of all of Ukraine has been achieved, when Russian war criminals, including President Putin, have been brought to justice, and when Ukraine has finally assumed its rightful place among the community of Euro-Atlantic nations. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor next to Sebastian Tynkkynen.
Thank you, Chair. During the recently concluded term, we approved a support instrument for Ukraine amounting to 50 billion euros. But what does it say about us Europeans that the size of the EU recovery instrument was 800 billion euros, with half intended for green and digital transition projects? Are our priorities in order? Should this House instead ensure that we transition safely back to the situation we were in before, respecting state borders and not allowing Putin's predatory actions? Only then can we be sure that other worthy goals can be achieved. Every day that the suffering of Ukrainians continues, we should look at ourselves in the mirror and feel ashamed. We are helping Ukraine to fight, but not to win. This must change. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Mr. Tynkkynen. And next is Diana Jovanovici-Sosuaka.
Vă mulțumesc, doamnă președintă.
Thank you, Madam President. As a Romanian senator in February 2022, I was behind an initiative bringing together ambassadors, the European Commission and the European Parliament to bring about peace, but only Russia was interested. The way to peace is not through arms. You've destroyed Romania. Romanians are poor as a result of helping Ukraine. We have more than 1 million Romanians in Ukraine. They're not even allowed to speak Romanian. They are not allowed to speak, and so I'm in favor of peace. There should be peace negotiations and not arms.
Thanks a lot, Madam President. And really, it's very important that we are starting this term with a very strong resolution on Ukraine, declaring that our policies towards Ukraine will be continued. But continuation is not enough. We need to see that during those 2 years, our support to Ukraine was really enough for Ukraine to defend itself, but not enough for the victory. Let's look into the numbers. Last year, Russians spent for the war in Ukraine more than $120 billion. Ukrainians managed to collect and to use for their defense only $80 billion. And out from those 80 billion, only 40 billion were from the West. So really, we can look into the perspective of Ukrainian victory only if we shall increase quite largely by 2 or 3 times our support, military support to Ukraine, and that is what we need to do. For those who are arguing that, Ukraine should agree with the peace conditions of Putin, I would suggest to look into possibility to offer to Putin territory of their own country. That would be very, precise what you should do.
Thank you.
Peace can be achieved only if Ukraine is winning and its territorial sovereignty is defended, and that can be done only with our much stronger support.
Thank you, Mr. Kubilius. I give the floor now to Mr. Ronsa.
So much, Madam President. I will speak Polish. Zabieram głos w tej debacie.
I take the floor in this debate because in the last parliamentary term there were many debates on Ukraine in the House, and there was much criticism of Poland and the Poles. There was criticism of Polish farmers. Polish farmers were defending Polish land, Polish food and Polish food security. I remind you of this because in this new parliamentary term, I hope there will be no false narratives. This parliament will be a better parliament if people speak correctly, if people speak the truth. Yet some of the members here today have not done so in the past, and I think when we talk about these important matters, we should behave appropriately.
5 minutes. Is Mr. Mandel here? Lucas. Mr. Mandel. Mr. Mandel. He's here.
Thank you very much. There's a different name on the plate. We must not be distracted from various powers in the world who try to distract us from what's really important, to defend our very civilization against this Russian attack. That means to stand by Ukraine more than ever, even due to the developments in the United States that mean for Europe to become more self-responsible. This is what we need, and this is most important when we talk during a week when there is the 10-year anniversary of the attack against a plane with EU citizens, when there was an attack against a children's hospital last week. Let's not get distracted from that, especially during this new mandate in European Parliament. This will be the period of time when things will be decided for our civilization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mandel. So the session is suspended for 5 minutes. We meet again at 10 for the election of the questors.